What's up, Colorado Realtors? I'm Scott Peterson. Thank you for joining me for another edition of Legal Bites. It is Friday, the 3rd of April, another installment in our quarantine series of Legal Bites. Doors still closed. I'm still locked in. And like I say, someday that'll open up and I'll walk right out of here. I'm getting hungry, though. Whether or not I had a single thing to talk to you guys about today, I would have still recorded this Legal Bites because, as you probably noticed as it started, we got a brand new intro. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Monica Panzer. She's CAR's creative marketing specialist, I think we call her. She's really a creative marketing genius, and she's one of my favorite people in the world and does a really phenomenal job of kind of the back end on all of this and a lot of the really fun stuff and events and everything else we do at CAR. So I hope you guys like that. Monica said, what do you want? I said, a little bit more bass, a little bit more funk. And I said, don't funk it up, Monica. And look at what she produced. I thought it was great. I keep listening to it over and over and over again. Anyhow, I was going to do this regardless of whether I had anything to talk about today, but I do have something to talk about today. Once again, the last couple of weeks, it's been weird because there's days that are kind of a little bit more steady and quiet, and then there's days that things just sort of blow up. And today was a little bit of that. We got some, and that's the only thing I'm going to talk about specifically here in this Legal Bites, but got a copy of, there were some news articles that came out kind of late yesterday and today related to the aspects of the shelter in place or critical business or essential service designation. And so what happened is there was a couple of news reports last night and some news articles this morning that a realtor here in the Denver metro area received from the Colorado Attorney General's office a letter just a few days ago. March 31st was the date of the letter. And it came from one of the deputy attorney generals. And basically, it'd be the equivalent of like a cease and desist letter. In other words, the letter came in, and I've got a copy of it, but it essentially said, "Hey, we had a complaint that you requested that a resident of a property vacate the premises for a showing, and that's not appropriate. That's not consistent with the shelter order that is currently in place in any statewide or any of the counties." But this coming from the Attorney General was specifically referencing the governor's statewide stay-at-home order. And so stop doing that. Please, be aware, improve your behavior. You could be subjected to a fine and imprisonment and so forth. And so in the letter, the Attorney General appears to be sort of drawing a delineation in terms of the critical business definition, which, as we know in the governor's executive order, professional services, including real estate transactions, is essentially considered or deemed an essential or critical business. And so real estate transactions has been the definition that I think is reasonably broad. And I would argue that definition of a real estate transaction really commences probably at the time of a listing agreement or entering into a brokerage relationship with a consumer, and that real estate transaction runs through the closing or delivery of possession in a sales transaction of the real estate. And so that would be my thinking, and that would include showings as well. And so I've been talking to you guys a lot about showings, and I've been giving you the silly line, with great power comes great responsibility. And I've been encouraging you guys to be very, very conservative and judicious with how you're handling showings of new listings and with your buyers that you're working with. Well, this particular listing broker had asked the resident, who I think was a tenant in the premises, to vacate the premises for the purposes of a showing, and then showed the property. And I think what happened was that the individual complained to the Attorney General's office, and so this cease and desist letter effectively was sent to the broker and the news media got a hold of it, and so now there's some reasonable question, I think, as to how the Attorney General's office is interpreting that, because what they said specifically in their letter is that showings and open houses and such are marketing services and something that is separate and distinct from the real estate transaction. And so what we've done at CAR is reached out to the Attorney General's office and specifically asked for a little bit of clarity on that, because again, based on how I would perceive a real estate transaction, I think a showing would be included. The open house thing, like, listen, if you guys are still doing those, then stop. I just don't. I think that the open house thing poses far too many risks. But the showing thing, again, in a very deliberate and conservative and conscientious sort of manner, I'll leave that, obviously up to you guys. It is obviously up to you guys. So, but we're hoping for some additional clarification from the Attorney General's office with regard to, are they actually delineating between a real estate transaction and more of a marketing transaction, as their letter might seem to indicate. And so and I don't have an answer. I sent a formal sort of email and asked for potentially some clarity. It's not going to come today, which is why I'm doing the video now. But in the meantime, I want you guys to be super cautious about what you're doing, the activities that you're undertaking, how those activities might be perceived by third parties, obviously tenants, maybe neighbors of properties that you're looking at, and potentially even your own clients. And so do be very mindful of the critical sort of, public health crisis that we're in. And as I've mentioned, that everybody is reacting and receiving their news differently. And so for the purposes of our whole industry, make sure you're using, in every regard, that critical business designation at the state level in as most responsible manner as possible. And if you haven't seen my second most recent video, I think, with regard to kind of the distinction and the limitations on state versus local shelter in place, and you've got some confusion about where you fit there, reflect back to the last or maybe two videos ago from earlier this week about kind of hopefully some clarification there. So anyhow, I'll hope to give you guys an update at some point early next week when hopefully get some feedback or response from the Attorney General's office. In the meantime, make sure you're super responsible and mindful that, the interpretation of that governor's order is, it could be received differently by different people or different agencies. And so anyhow, I'll leave it there. I want to remind everybody that Monday morning, if you haven't registered for it, and I'm not sure, you might even be fully registered at this point, but from 10:30 to 12, I'm going to be doing a webinar with my friend Damian Cox and my colleague and friend Elizabeth Peets. And we're going to be covering a wide variety of topics related to all of this and taking some questions and answers at the end of that. And I think that's it. Have a fantastic weekend, or as good of a weekend as you can. I've found that it's amazing. You sort of reconnect with family, and I'm getting some family time in with my oldish kids and wife, and being able to play cards and games and do things that I don't know. I feel like we haven't done in a long time. So maybe very few and far between positive elements or impact to everything that we're all going through, but try and really identify and embrace those as you are, as you're, looking out at what we're all dealing with. So anyhow, have a good weekend, and I'm sure I'll be talking to you guys next week. And if you have more questions, clarification, any other issues, the legal hotline is available. We are going back next week to regular hours, so 9 to 12 and 1 to 4. If we see the need to ramp up again in the subsequent days or weeks, we'll certainly do that to accommodate the volume of calls. But I think we've stabilized things to some degree. So anyhow, I'll leave you with that, and take care, guys.